Well, it's 3 p.m. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Ultimate success in HR comes when we work with business leaders to drive successful human capital decisions, structure, and process that result in tangible improvements to the success of the organization. Rightly said by the father of HRD movement in India, human resource is about human possibilities. HRAI has introduced exciting series like Connecting the Dots, the 2020 Dialogue, Masterclass, and today it welcomes you all to its one of the most eccentric and unconventional series, Tangle to Untangle, my perspective straight from my experience, HR Unplugged. We are honored that this series is inaugurated by none other than our HR guru, Dr. T.V. Rao sir. Before we begin the session, I will take few minutes, ladies and gentlemen, to run through some of the protocols while on Zoom, though many of you would be familiar. It is very important to follow these rules in order to have an effective session. Kindly do not record this meeting as this would be available on our social media pages. Request all of you to please keep your Zoom audio on mute. Please use your full name as your screen name and not your device name, as it doesn't allow us to identify who you are. As your video is off and your name is not mentioned, we will have to move those participants to the waiting room for security reasons. So please cooperate. It would be great to have all the participants' feedback. We will be running a poll before the Q&A session. Request all participants to kindly give your feedback on the session. HRAI is a non-profit human resource association that firmly believes in delivering value through landmark summits, which offers unique opportunities for subject matter experts to share knowledge, which will help our members to learn about the latest advancement in technology and innovation. In the world of conference, we believe in leveraging the power of knowledge to deliver value to every participating delegate and organization at our events. This is the cornerstone of our drive towards excellence. I now take the privilege to introduce the speaker for today, Dr. T.V. Rao, Chairman, T.V. Rao Learning Systems Private Limited. He was a professor of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, between 1973 and 1994, and a visiting or adjunct professor since then. He continues to teach select courses at IIM Ahmedabad and is currently on the Board of Governors of IIM Ahmedabad. Dr. Rao has also worked as L&T Professor of HRD at XLRI, Jamshedpur, during 1983-85. He is the founder and first president of the National HRD Network and the first honorary director of the Academy of HRD, India. He was also a visiting faculty at the Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and was the HRD advisor to the Reserve Bank of India. He authored and co-authored over 60 books in the area of HR and leadership movement. He is currently the chairman of TVRL, and few of his offerings will be briefed by his team member, Akhila.
Hello, everyone. My name is Akhila Krishnan, and I'm a talent development consultant with TV Rao Learning Systems. We all are going through a challenging time now with COVID and all. And one thing that this crisis has taught us is how to be self-sufficient. Focusing on this and believing that we have to be our own biggest investment, TVRLS has come up with a series of DIY programs. For each month, we have a set of 3 to 4 programs. And for the month of August, we are offering virtual certificate programs on psychometric testing and competency-based interviewing skills. To know more, please visit www.tvrls.com, or you can directly contact me on 9747 377 203. Also, you can chat in this chat box, which is available in the Zoom. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Akhila. Now I'll introduce the moderator for today's session, Mr. Jagmohan Banwar, CEO, The Next Milestone Technologies Private Limited. Jagmohan Banwar is rated amongst the top executive coaches in Asia. He was the first master coach in the continent and has coached board members, CEOs, and CXOs from leading organizations across sectors. His experience of writing on the top business leader and entrepreneurs around the world enables him to share insights that are invaluable of our business owner. Panwar was also one of the first Asian speakers to be a part of international speaking bureaus like the Worldwide Speaker Bureau. Panwar is the best-selling author of 6 books. His retroit includes Nadella, The Changing Face of Microsoft, Pichai, The Future of Google, Get Happy Now, Think Your Way to Millions, The Curse of Brahma, Volume 1 in the Krishna Theology. His latest book is Click, The Amazing Story of India's E-commerce Boom and Where It Is Headed. He has worked in leadership roles with the corporate sector, heading national and international roles with Standard Chartered Bank, HDFC Bank, and HSBC. In 2004, after doping his corporate avatar, he founded People First in India and Middle East. He was also the founding dean and CEO at IIFM. Currently, he is CEO of the Next Milestone Technologies, which is an edutech company focusing on making people across the world success ready. Without taking much time, I would now request Mr. Jagmohan to take over this session.
Muted, you're muted.
Yeah, you'll have to unmute, sir.
Thank you, Pierre. Very kind words. I'm not sure how much of that is well-deserved, but thank you all the same. I'd like to thank HRAI and the entire team, including you, for organizing this. Warm welcome to all the participants, and Dr. Rao, I am so looking forward to this conversation. So most of us have known Dr. Rao as the man who pioneered the HRD movement in India. In this conversation, I'm hoping to get to some facets of Dr. Rao, some lesser known facets that have probably contributed to making him the person that we all know him for today. So Dr. Rao, my first volley at you is going to start before you started working at IIM Ahmedabad. So when you joined Ahmedabad in 1973, help us understand what was the state of affairs as far as the HR business was concerned at the institute.
At the institute or in the country?
Let's start with IIM Ahmedabad first, then we'll move to the country.
Okay. At IIM Ahmedabad, was doing great. But before I answer your question, let me acknowledge and thank HRAI, Ankita, Peterson, and team for providing me this opportunity and to get interviewed by you, Jagmohan. I have written a book called, that was my last book, Effective People. And I defined an effective person as one who constantly searching to discover his or her talent and use the talent for the benefit of other people in the country and make a difference. I think there can't be a better person than you to be qualified as a very effective person with such a versatile kind of a background. It's a pleasure and privilege to be interviewed by you, and I'll be happy to whatever I can. 1973, I think, and I don't consider myself in any way a contributor to any change in IIM Ahmedabad. I am one of the many who have built that particular institution. Incidentally, I may make a small correction to my biodata, Peter. I think somebody gave you a year and a half outdated. So I'm no more on the board of IIM. My 6-year term, 2 terms are over, and I'm also not teaching anymore. I think this is enough. At 74, one should probably be spending more time teaching a large part of the country rather than getting stuck to one institute. But that is one of the reasons why I left IIM after I got my 20-year medal. Jagmohan, to answer your question, so 1973, I actually joined to work on evaluating the Gujarat Entrepreneurship Program. Gujarat was doing a lot of entrepreneurship programs. They had a program for unemployed people, another for technicians, employed technicians, and the third for people who had neither education or any other kind of a thing. So they started a program and they ran it for 3 years. After 3 years, I think they came across achievement motivation models from one David McClelland and team, and they used these models to uh, train the same training they were giving. They started giving additional training on behavioral science inputs. And a few years after that, it occurred to somebody that are we wasting our money and energy? Is behavioral sciences, is it making a difference? So I joined to evaluate all the programs, visited a number of people all over Gujarat, and concluded at the end of it that training, just a 1 week training of achievement motivation, makes a benefit of as much as 17 to 20% entrepreneurial movement. That's about 20% more of those who went through the program became entrepreneurs and so on. So at one point of time, you can say this has nothing to do with HRD, but for me, HRD is everything. HRD is life, whatever goes on. So developing entrepreneurs is HRD. That way, if you look at IIM Ahmedabad, it's the HRD Institute, but we don't call it. We call it a management school. In IIM Ahmedabad, we had a area to which I joined. The area was called Organizational Behavior Area. So I joined as a assistant professor, to be precise, called as Faculty Research Associate, equivalent to the assistant professor. They called me Research Associate, Faculty Research Associate, because they wanted me to work more on education. And I had the good fortune of working with Professor Ravi Mathai, who just stepped aside as the director. He was the first full-time director after Vikram Sarabhai. He was honorary director. So before I joined, he stepped aside and he said that to fulfill the mission of IIM Ahmedabad, that is professionalizing management in all sectors, he thought that he should be working on education and such other sectors. So I had the opportunity to start a education systems group with Uday Parikh, Ravi Mathai, and myself. Now there we did a number of things with universities. The first program we ran was on self-renewal of educational institutions. I mean, you look at HRD today, many of the people who work in corporate sector would say, what is all this? There's nothing to do with HRD. But for me, HRD is life. At that time, we never thought that this is HRD. This could come under a term like HRD. But we were doing it. We were working with the Gujarat Agriculture University, which was just formed, combining Junagadh, Anand, and Valsad, Navsari campuses make into one campus. And the question posed was that how do we make this Gujarat University, Agriculture University successful? How to merge these three to make one new university. This is one. Then St. Xavier's College in Ahmedabad was struggling their best to get autonomy, which they never got. But we were requested, can we help us prepare for autonomy? And then we started a project called Javaja project. Actually, government of Rajasthan asked us at that point of time to implement a high power committee report, in which the high power committee report, which was headed by the education minister and a whole number of people, said the most important issue bothering Rajasthan is attracting children to enroll in schools. School enrollments were very poor, particularly girls' enrollment in schools was atrocious. Dropout rates were high. Parents didn't want to send their children to schools. So the committee came up with some recommendations, and we were asked to go and talk to villagers and tell us what is the way in which we can make education more relevant. So there we visited villages and then came up with a number of things, particularly how curriculum which is taught in primary schools and middle schools is totally irrelevant. That is the reason why the school dropouts are there. Now, this is also a HRD issue. Those days, we never thought that there is going to be a term called human resource development, which encompasses all that I have been doing. But the real break-in came when we were asked by Larsen and Toubro. My colleague Uday Parikh was asked by examine their performance appraisal system. After examining the appraisal system, most of your audience will know this because there are books available on this. We said that if you want to make performance really enjoyable, people spend 70% of their life, waking life, for the organization. Organization is the first family. And if you want people to give their best, you have to make that family very happy place to work. And that can be done only when you have somebody who takes care of their interests in terms of even telling them what they're expected to perform, giving them feedback, looking at their career opportunities, building their competencies, looking at the culture and so on. And that's why they said personnel department. Now that is reflective of what was happening in IIM. IIM didn't have a personnel faculty. They only had organizational behavior, in which there were half of them who were specializing in industrial relations. Some were specializing in personal management, but everyone taught organizational behavior, which included personal dynamics, interpersonal dynamics, and so on. So the situation in IIM is no different if you look at, except that it's known for its management thought. It's known for whatever new thinking can come from there and things like that. So that was my entry into HRD.
So Dr. Rao, since you brought up the topic of Larsen and Toubro, I'm curious. If I recall correctly, I think somewhere around after joining IMA, you moved to XLRI for a brief period as the Larsen and Toubro professor for HRD.
That's right.
How did that happen, and how did that lead to setting up the Center for HRD at XLRI Jamshedpur?
Yeah, 1974 is when we were asked by L&T to examine the performance appraisal system. And then we recommended, if you want the performance appraisal to really take good shape, it should become a part of the Human Resource Development Department. So we created a new department. There was nowhere in the world, to the extent I know. I mean, at that time, we didn't know there is nowhere in the world there is a Human Resource Development Department. It's only much later I was looking for. There were people who used the term human resources. So we articulated a philosophy of HRD, and the philosophy of HRD is building competencies, building culture, and building commitment. And we envisaged HRD as a department which helps on so many things: build individual as individual, build individual in relation to the role, help individuals to create future roles for themselves, build the team, build the organization. So HRD is a tool for taking organization forward, balancing specialization with. So our entire concept of HRD is a philosophy. In a way, you can say it's a management philosophy. So after we started it, State Bank of India, Uday Parikh, my colleague, he was my senior colleague. In fact, he invited me to join him. Between us, the age difference is almost about 20 years. He was born in 1925. I was born in 1946. So you can see. So, but I think we never felt that kind of age difference. We were more like friends and colleagues and things like that. So he conceptualized this, and he went and talked about this new design at State Bank of India board meeting. Without blinking an eyelid, State Bank decided to start a new HRD department. They had no consulting, nothing. Only talked by Uday Parikh, they started HRD department.
Which year was this?
Is in 1975.
That's pretty incredible for
Yes.
State Bank at that time to have taken that approach and been that open.
Yeah, very interestingly, in 1975, when they took the decision, in 1976, all the associates had HRD managers, but State Bank was still struggling to have a department. So associates were the first, and the State Bank immediately put a chief general manager, HRD, and then a department was started. And they were trying to, of course, they were trying to follow this. And I was, my colleague Uday Parikh and S.K. Bhattacharya were consultants to Bharat Earth Movers. I mean, there are a number of stories I can tell you. This tells a lot about what do you do when you happen to be on the board. Ravi Mathai was on the board of Bharat Earth Movers. So in one of the board meetings, apparently he told Bharat Earth Movers, "You're thinking too small, think big. You are only a 70 crore company. In the next 5 years, you should become a 700 crore company." General Mani, who was the CMD at the time, apparently asked Ravi, how will I do that? Can you help me to do that? He said, "I have a professor from IIM. He will come and help you." And he sent Bhattacharya to create a structure to make Bharat Earth Movers a 700 crore company. And obviously, if you have a structure, you need people. Uday Parikh was invited to start till the HRD. And it all exists in consulting report. Then they had a question of who is going to, HRD is a new animal. Who is going to set it up? Then they wrote to Uday Parikh, obviously recommended, and then they wrote to me. Then I went on leave from IIM as general manager at the age of, I think I must have been 1970, this is 1978, may have been about 32 years of age. I said, I need the highest salary to be paid because in a defense sector, a 32-year fellow becoming general manager, nobody is going to simply listen. So
Sure.
you have to make it. So 1 year I went. I'm mentioning this to say that year made a lot of difference in my own understanding. Here in L&T, we conceptualized, State Bank conceptualized. Now, of course, I was working with L&T on a task force and so on. So it helped me to actually implement all that I have talked of. In 1 year, of course, when I joined it, I said that, look, I don't want to be in a defense sector undertaking for the simple reason I'm interested in writing, and defense sector won't allow me to write because you have your own code of conduct and so on. Now I'm coming to the story. I mean, that was the kind of a scenario with, you see, State Bank, L&T, Bharat Earth Movers. And many people, I think we will, IIM professors normally will keep talking about it. By about 1981, we held a conference. We wrote the first book called as Designing and Managing HR Systems, published in 1981. We suddenly discovered HRD has become a buzzword. By that time, the American Society for Training and Development started calling it HRD, although they didn't retitle them. So many Indian training and development departments renamed them as HRD centers. And some of the personal people didn't want to stop. Then they also renamed them as HR departments. So human resource development is our concept. Now here is training and development, which becomes HRD, and personnel, which also becomes HR department. That was the time when XLRI was given this chair by L&T. I still remember I was in Bangkok. Somebody from Ahmedabad called me to say the director of XLRI is in Ahmedabad, and he's trying to recruit a professor for this. Are you interested? I said, no, I'm not interested. I'm very happy at IIM Ahmedabad. We're doing a number of things. When I came back, I came to know that the offer is going to go for somebody who had absolutely no idea of HRD. So this became a little bit of a challenge for me. How can I let Larsen & Toubro chair be taken by someone who has no idea of HRD? Then I called up the director and I said that if you offer me, I will straight away come, but I have a condition. You must let me set up a center for HRD so that we can promote HRD. By the time something happened in IIM, when I wanted to set up a HRD center in IIM normally, informally said, if every professor who specializes in something wants to set up a center, we'll have 70 centers here. IIM's own identity will get lost. So therefore, that is not possible. So one thing, IIM's not setting up a HRD center and XLRI agreeing for me to set up, pushed me to go there to set up the Center for HRD at XLRI in 1983. That is the starting of the Center for HRD.
I think it just goes to show that one entity is lost could be another entity is gained. Also, what I find interesting about that narrative that you just shared is that even about 40 years ago, HR was playing such a strategic role in the organizational context. And I think that's a part which most of us in the fraternity, battle and find it as a challenge in trying to implement. And to have done that 40, 45 years ago, I think that's commendable.
Thank you.
We spoke about the National HRD Network that you founded. Share with us, what is the philosophy behind it? How did that happen?
Well, actually, if you start looking from 1974, 75, when we started the first HRD department, I think talking about it, implementing it, simultaneously at IIM Ahmedabad, I was teaching courses on entrepreneurship, teaching personal interpersonal dynamics, and introduced courses on HRD. This is what I was doing. This is a little bit of a teaching we are doing, and we are disseminating this. Now, for me, HRD is a philosophy. And part of this also comes from, I suppose, when I look back, comes from my own background. I started as a science graduate. I was a BSc mathematics from Loyola College. Then by a series of interventions, accidents, you may call it, chance factors, you may call it, I ended up to do my bachelor's in education at the Regional College of Education. At the time started with collaboration from Ohio State University by NCERT. So that 1 year of my BEd at Mysore made a lot of difference because I learned a lot of psychology there. A mathematics science student going there and learning psychology, seeing my professors do experiments with rats and teach us how rats learn. And that was a wonderful thing. That is when the professor suggested me to go to psychology. So I think my education background, psychology background, and my PhD happened to be on how medical colleges impact medical students. This is 1973, before I joined. So professional socialization of medical students. All these things, my entrepreneurship, all these things together, for me, HRD became a philosophy, a way of life. And when I saw training and development simply renaming themselves personnel, philosophy getting lost, I started therefore promoting this at the HRD Center at XLRI. We did a number of programs at XLRI. For a couple of years I was there. One Father Abraham, who later became director of XLRI, was my research associate. He was doing his PhD in Ahmedabad, registered for Gujarat University, but he was assisting me at XLRI and so on. So one of the things that we had done as a part of the L&T chair was to hold this seminar, national seminar on HRD, where we disseminate all that we have learned. By the time, unfortunately, Ravi Mathai died, 1984. I think a few months after I joined IIM, joined XLRI, Ravi Mathai died, and so that shook me.
That was a year before you started HRD Network. Yes.
Yeah, that was the year before I started HRD Network. So 1984, it's about 6-7 months after I left IIM. I went on leave from IIM. I didn't leave the institute. I was on leave to set up the HRD Center. So this Ravi's death was a shock, because Ravi had a particular philosophy. We were doing something in rural Rajasthan. He stood for certain kind of things. So I said, this Center for HRD is only for till time I can bring it to a particular level, I want to go back. So when I was coming back, we held this particular seminar. Now this is a little bit of secret which I can only tell you, because normally I don't like talking about this. I don't like talking about this because when I talk about this, it takes away the sense of ownership from a number of people who contributed to HRD. So my intention is not at all to take away the ownership of so many people. But I must tell you, I had in mind, I am leaving XLRI and going to IIM Ahmedabad. How do I let the Center for HRD continue? If I go to Ahmedabad, Father Abraham is also going to move with me to Ahmedabad. He's going to be doing his PhD from Ahmedabad. There will be no one left in XLRI Jamshedpur. So this center should continue with remote kind of things. This is number one. Number two, I should not stop my desire to communicate HRD philosophy. Now, these two things are important because this is on the last day of the 4-day workshop. In the last session, I said, 4 days we have discussed and we learned a lot from each other. How do we let this continue? Then there were many sessions. Then I asked a question, should this learning from each other continue only with an XLRI or Larsen & Toubro sponsoring a seminar? They said, no, not necessary. So then why don't we therefore think of a mechanism by which we can continue to share? Obviously, if you have to continue to share without institutional and industries involvement, it has got to be a professional body. Then I raised another question. We 40 of us assembled here, we learn from each other. We have learned so much. Should this learning be limited only to Bombay, or can it be done in each city? Can we learn from each other? Then there were a group of people volunteered. We had 2 people volunteering from Chennai, 2 from Bangalore, 2 from Delhi, 2 from Baroda. So we said, let us call this a body, professional body. That is how the foundation for the HRD network, we called it HRD network. It took a couple of years from then, from 1985. This happened in 1985, March 2nd to be precise. March 2nd afternoon, Sea Rock Hotel. That is where the seed for National HRD Network was sown. The Sea Rock Hotel doesn't exist. Fortunately, HRD Network still exists, although in a little bit of a different form. The philosophy is to promote the philosophy of HRD. That
Dr.
is
I'm gonna stop you here for a moment. It's been about 35 years since we started the National HRD Network. And from what I hear you, there was a certain philosophy behind it. How have you seen that philosophy changing, if at all, over the last 35 years? And maybe a bit controversial, but do you believe that at this time, the inherent philosophy at NHRD is similar to what it was when the seeds were sown?
I will have some difficulty in giving a straight yes to your question. Having said that, I also don't want to say that I'm disappointed or anything like that. I think life takes the kind of turns it takes, and not necessarily in your full control. I mean, it is like asking if Ravi Mathai used to be alive today or Sarabhai used to be alive today, and you ask him the question that is IIM doing what you wanted it to do. I think I'll find very difficult to imagine he's saying anything other than saying, oh, it's doing a wonderful job. But in the heart of hearts, if you go and ask him, he may still say, I wanted the IIM to work on health and population management, manage government better, and I only wish if IIM had made its impact, the kind of things that are happening today in the country in terms of political parties fighting each other and not caring as much as they should be about the country itself. I don't know. This is what is my assumption. He would probably, in the heart of heart, say, but he will reconcile himself and say, but I think that is the best. No one institute can do anything better than this.
So let's frame that question differently. If there were one thing that you would want the NHRD to do differently today, what would that be?
I would want it to spend a lot of you see, HRD network, when we started it, it's not only a network of HRD managers in the corporate sector. It's a network of HRD managers in all sectors of the society. In fact, in the first conference itself, we wanted the government to be involved. We took a group of IAS officers from Gujarat to be partners to this. So today, if you ask me where is the great HRD need in the country, I would say government. If every government employee does his job very well, builds competencies, builds culture, and builds commitment to the nation, to the long-term kind of objectives, the world today, the country will be different. So I would like very much, would have liked very much HRD to work with government, would have worked with not-for-profit sector. There would have been a HRD network of nurses, HRD network of teachers, HRD network of directors of various institutions. So there should have been, because HRD is for all, from farmers to health workers, to teachers, to politicians, so my disappointment is we are too much stuck with corporate sector. This is because I think for survival, you depended on corporate sector. And therefore, when you depended on corporate sector, they gave you a little funds and you went on servicing them. Barring a couple of chapters, like I know for certain chapters like Bangalore chapter is doing a marvelous job given the kind of conditions. They held recently a convention in which they had competition for NGOs, they had academia and industry interface. So if you look at that, that offers a good model of moving in the direction in which we wanted to move. But I wish this happened 20 years back, not today. But even today, better late than never. So my disappointment is too much corporatization of National HRD Network.
So we're saying more governmental, more focus on government institutions, PSUs, NGOs, non-profits, and maybe startups as well. Moving away from pure play.
We should have moved from HRD for corporate sector to HRD for the country. That's where I think we could have done a lot. It's a little difficult, but it's not impossible. It takes a totally different time.
There was this leadership workshop that you were doing once at the Isha Foundation.
Yes.
And as I hear, Sadhguru was there, and after the session, there was this whole interaction with him where he, spoke about treating
human is not a resource,
but as possibilities.
Yes.
How did that interaction impact you, and how did that lead to certain changes with what you've been doing post that event?
Well, when I heard that statement, it touched me. It touched me because what happened in the last 45 years in the field of HRD, since the time we started the HRD department in L&T, as I mentioned to you, in human resource development, the human HRD the human got substituted I mean by no human, it's only resources. So human got dropped because there is a targets, there is task orientation, there is competitiveness. So much so even HRD network included a term competitiveness in its initial kind of remarks, which I thought that that is not what we. It's very much of the Americanized HRD concept. We work for competitiveness. I don't think we work for competitiveness. We work for collaboration, survival, etc., etc. So when I heard this, I felt that now this is a good term. This is a good stick to beat those people who dropped the development from HRD and human from HRD, and are only talking of as though the HR department is to achieve targets, tasks, and so on. So I jumped on it later when somebody in here there said that let us hold a program. This is a beautiful kind of thing. In fact, this is one person from vice president from Max Industries, and then JB from Isha Foundation. The three of us got together. We thought of this, and we said this is a good one. I think this is the way we should tell people that you have reduced human resource development to resources. So let us therefore come back to say human is not a resource. Now for me, the intention is to catch the attention of HR people. I don't agree that human is not a resource. I very much think that human is a unlimited resource. I would definitely think, we never said human is a resource, human resource. Human resource means every human being is born with unlimited capabilities. He can accomplish so many things in life. So now the term possibility strikes to be a better kind of a thing at this context. Now that it has done its job, I am coming back to tell people, don't accuse HR. To me, HR has evolved to a level. HR means people. HR, I mean, you cannot now talk of even human is not a resource. If you go through their brochures, many times they say, this is meant for HR managers. HR, you can't. So HR has become people. So to me, what Sadhguru has said is a wonderful thing. And I like all that he has said. Anything that is measured is quantified. And anything that is quantified loses the possibility. So human beings can't be quantified. They are unlimited. They're born. That is precisely what we were saying and things like that. So we ran 3 programs. In fact, on 8th of August, there is a half-a-day program. I am not participating in it. I have another program going on in my own company. In addition to that, I think the right kind of people who have really managed the COVID situation, the CEOs and other people are being called. So this is the one which is the 4th, but it's not exactly the same program we have run. So I think this is one of the things we have done to create consciousness. And I think the last 5 years we have done some good job, because now people are saying, some of them are saying human is not a resource. Why are you calling it a resource? So drawing the attention that human is a possibility. Human beings are phenomenally talented. So that is what I believe. So it strikes me very much. I believe that human beings are possibilities, and I believe that human beings are born with unlimited kind of a talent. You use HR, you use something else. This, let me tell you, is not new. In 1986, I held a workshop. And in the workshop, there were a couple of people who attended. One of them is from Baroda. He said, Professor Rao, I don't agree with your concept of human resource development. Don't call human a resource. Call it as something else. Then Chakravarti from IIM Calcutta said, you should call it as human response development. Okay. Then somebody else came up with the human potential development. Different names were used. I said, no, I think good or bad, this is how we coined. We are going to stuck to this. And I still think that that's a great thing that we have done. I continue to stick to this. Like yeah, you call yourself HRAI, HR Association, right?
I think sometimes individuals tend to get lost in semantics also.
That's right. Yes.
I think what's more important, as you rightly said, is not whether we're looking at them as resources, but whether we are giving them an ecosystem, you know, and enabling them to actually be sentient, thinking, creative beings who can contribute to themselves as well as to the organization. And I think that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Okay, I have a few one-liners for you now. So I'm going to, because I caught on to some of the terms that you had used at the beginning of this interaction, and I love those. So I want you to give me your thoughts on these in one line. Competency. What does that mean to you?
Another word for talent, to be able to do many things and increase your choices.
Okay.
Yes.
Commitment?
Commitment. Do whatever you do with happiness.
I so love that. Culture?
Is what you leave after you go. A CEO retires once there is a culture. So culture is your next successor for a CEO.
And which carries on beyond one step.
Yes, which carries on beyond.
Fantastic. And you see so many of organizations in India and out of India which are actually doing that, where the original promoters or the founding teams have moved on, but the culture still sustains.
Yes.
Okay, engagement?
Engagement again will be similar to commitment, doing whatever you do with happiness and not even noticing the time you have spent.
And the final one, employees?
Are the backbone of any organization.
Okay. Before I move on to questions, because I'm noticing that there are already approximately about 85 questions on my table here, which have come in from the viewers. And I want to leave some time on the table for that. 2 questions, and these are again questions which have also been voiced by the viewers. What role do you see B schools playing in enabling HR to be a high value add function within organizations? So what can B schools do to make a difference?
I think first of all, B schools should relook at themselves and should understand that B schools are HR schools. You are preparing people for any business. I mean, any business. To me, you have to redefine business. In fact, just the other day in one of the B schools, we were looking at the mission statement and they came up with the mission statement to prepare leaders for the future of a business. I said that, look, you need to define this business. Now, today, everything has become business. We say even government is doing business, right? What is happening today in our country? The political parties fighting, they're doing nothing but business. Health is business. Education has become, the other day, if you have listened to Vijay Govindarajan from US, he talked from Harvard. He said the biggest industry in US is education and health. So if you treat business that way, I think it is important for B schools to recognize they are in the business of human resource development. This is the most important thing they need. And then they start relooking at what are the various ways in which they can promote this. This is the biggest change that is required, because today I am saying HRD is not the business only of HRD people. In fact, the HRD professional success is on the day when the HRD professional is not needed. Why do you need somebody to tell you to develop? So I think B schools will succeed when they convert themselves into a HR school. You don't have to call them, but you must recognize this, in which HR department just becomes a facilitator. They probably, in addition to training the students, they also train the institution building, self-renewal exercises, whole lot of things as internal change agents they can do. That is the way I look at it.
I guess how B schools, especially how B schools also ingrain the whole desire for entrepreneurship and the ability to succeed as entrepreneurs should also, I think, be an important fact that some of these institutes need to take cognizance of, because otherwise we are just churning out people who become, cogs in the wheel.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's happening to innovation then in that sense? Okay. Yeah. I think time to take some questions from the viewers as well. There are so many. My apologies in advance, viewers, in case I'm not able to take call. I will not be able to take all. So let's start with, what I've done is I've clustered them. So, questions which have been asked by a lot of people, I'm going to prioritize those first. How do we encounter the biggest challenge of retrenchment in the current situation? So loyalty of employees versus, say, the financial state of the employer.
Yeah, this is a very tricky question, Jagmohan. I think first I would start with a philosophy. of human resource as possibilities. Before you retrench anyone, help them to explore, transparently share with them whatever difficulties you have, and help them to explore the way they can help themselves and help you. Because it is sure that if you don't have the capacity to, if you don't exist, they are not likely to exist. I think everyone knows that. If you are in financial trouble, there is no need to say that, look, I mean, frankly, share with them. If they are a part of your family, what will you do? They are, of course, they have been a part of the family. I think Sadhguru used to say this: don't have use and throw philosophy. If you have use and throw philosophy, then what happens is at some point of time you will also face the same kind of a thing in a different kind of a context. So my suggestion number one is, please be transparent, take your people along, share and sharing your balance sheet is not new. As long back as in 1987-88, we had, of course, this is not, some of you may say, not a great example to talk of. Rishikesh Mafatlal told us how they would make the entire balance sheet open to even the employees, and how they would put the employees or the workers from the mills in touch with the customers who come from Germany and other kind of countries. I think sharing a balance sheet is anyway an open secret. There is nothing, anyone can be a shareholder and get to know it. But transparently share and ask them their suggestions. And maybe you will get some creative solutions. And if you can't, then anyway you're going to do what you're going to do in any case. Then do it with a human face. In a way, I mean, what prevents you from saying, look, this is the situation in which I am, and I'll still hold you on my roles. Not legally, I don't want to get into trouble. Legally, you are not there, but I'll put you, I assure you are on our road. The moment our situation goes better, you are back here. Or can you come up? I think that is the way. My way of dealing with retrenchment is transparently talk to people, treat them as entrepreneurs. I think the entrepreneurship in the employee should be aroused. I would say that even to.
It's interesting how some of the things which are so simple to understand are also
but
so.
We don't, Jagmohan, we don't try. Suppose you have to get rid of 1,000 employees in an airline.
Right.
What prevents you? I mean, in fact, I floated a concept called human possibility volunteers. Now, in this concept, I said I want to train a group of people who are volunteers to work on something like a 10,000 rupee a month. I don't want HR people who are looking to become a GM, AGM, vice president, etc., etc. I'll train you. Your job for next 1 year. I think 10,000 is good enough, because every month 3 of us in Ahmedabad have been living with just about 10,000 rupees. That's all you need in COVID time. Assume another year that you're going to have. So if you have a volunteer like this, now these are the kind of guys you should have, and get these 1,000 people whom you want to retrench. Let them lose. Talk to them. Find out. You might discover that they will become your marketing agents. They may become your sales agents. They may become so many things. They can keep doing it. World is vast. All that we need is.
I think apart from that, what it also does is it involves your stakeholders. It involves your employees as stakeholders in the decisions that you're going to take, and some of those are going to be tough decisions which are going to involve them. So you're actually making it easier for yourself to get to those decisions in the long run. But I guess at a psychological level, most of us have this embarrassment, this fear that, of being vulnerable. And I think that's what really stops us from involving people. Okay. The next question is, how do you see the role of data science evolving for HR professionals?
Role of? Say it again.
Data science. Data science.
Labor science.
Data science. Data science.
Oh, data. Oh, data science. Now, technology and data science. I think we have not, it's a great thing that is available to us. We have not used it properly. Data science is a great boon for anybody who wants to be taking decisions in relation to talent. Simply, I mean, we collect so much data about every individual from the time he joins till the time he leaves. They're all data available. In fact, I say that every employee can be treated as a kind of a you can have a portal. Every employee can keep on recording everything that she is doing. It's a phenomenal kind of a talent that is available. So if you maintain good data about individuals, it can throw up so many kind of things. Unfortunately, we are only using data science to predict employee turnover, predict the success of a job, which are certainly good, but I think it is high time that we go beyond this. And data science should create knowledge about people as possibilities, rather than simply creating in a narrow way whether this particular person suits my requirement or not.
So
Data science is a great boon. I think we have a long way to go in terms of putting it to right kind of a use, and building. A lot of things can be predicted with good data science.
So what we're saying is, going forward, it could be a great enabler of decisions for HR practitioners. But at the same time, the balancing act that most of us will need to play over there is, instead of using data science to treat our resources as mere widgets, how can we use the power of data science to actually make this more powerful for them, the business as well as the organization?
We are using today for short-term gains, short-term goals. We should simultaneously use it for long-term goals. The moment you treat human as a possibility and not merely somebody is there to achieve X amount of tasks or targets and Y amount of sales and so on, then you are into a totally different kind. I agree with you. That's very well summarized.
Thanks, Dr. Rao. There's another question. What should employees do so that the employer trusts in their abilities?
The employer
trusts in the abilities of the employee. What can the employee do to get there?
I think that's a good question. I want to put every employee into a framework of a performer. We have performance appraisals, right? Nowadays, we don't call them. I ban people from using the term appraisal. I say performance management systems. Now, if you have a performance management system, can you start using it as a system meant for your benefit? Now, how do I use it for my benefit? If I'm an employee, how do I look at the performance management system? If the company asks me to set targets, why do I keep asking so many questions to somebody who asked me to say, first tell me the departmental goals, later I will discuss? I think our employees negotiate a lot. And because they start with the feeling that the employer is not to be trusted, employer means the boss, HR is not to be trusted. So you must look at every HR tool as a tool meant for you. Then if you see it as a tool meant for you, training as a tool meant for you. And I know of companies where an employee is sponsored for training, he writes to HR department, please let me know the reasons why you are sponsoring me for this training program. I mean, this is stupid to ask somebody. I mean, why don't you? He's thinking of you. So number one is first you start trusting various systems as meant for your goal. If I perform well, for whose benefit is it? It's for my benefit. So may I take charge of my performance management system? Why should my boss set my KRAs? Why don't I set my KRAs? Why don't I set my targets? Why don't I start seeking feedback? Why don't I give feedback? Why do I need a coach? Why don't I coach my juniors? Why don't I coach even my seniors? So I think the moment the employee perceives himself as an owner of his or her own HR, trust will start getting built up. I think we are all the time starting with a win-lose game. I think
that's beautifully said. That's beautifully said. How proactive you are versus, let's say, taking a reactive approach or waiting for somebody else to, provide you feedback.
Absolutely.
How can you take trust in your own hands and say how you can maximize it? Also at a personal level, constantly evaluating your own credibility with various stakeholders, I think, puts you in a place where at any time, you know what your trust quotient is. Lovely. Okay, we have another one here. How do I use a STAR model in an effective way to answer situational-based interview questions?
First of all, I want to know, what do you mean by STAR model?
Okay,
But
I'm
there are
guessing.
certain people who are stars.
So I'm
Identify
guessing.
stars. Is it a bell curve you are meaning?
No, I think what Birwa and the others might be referring to, Dr. Rao, is the STAR model. So if you allow, I'll quickly address that one.
Yes. Okay.
So Birwa and others, the STAR model is basically, I'm guessing you're trying to ask Dr. Rao, how would you use that as an interviewee? As an interviewee, remember, the more succinct your answers and the more precise they are, the higher the probability of the interviewer, looking at you positively. What the STAR network really does is it helps you outline the situation that you want to talk about, then refer to the task very logically and specifically, then get into the action that you took with respect to the task, and eventually talk about the results or the outcomes that happened. So if you can marry these 4 attributes through a golden thread, as an interviewer, you'll be in a much better position to, position yourself positively with the interviewer. If it's the other way around, which is the interviewer is asking this question, the idea would be to test or validate certain assumptions about the interviewees. So I hope that answers your question. Let's move on to the next one.
Thanks, Jagmohan. I must learn more about the STAR model.
Dr. Rao, you were, I'm guessing you're giving me opportunities to, respond to a few questions,
Sure.
which is what a good coach should do. Thank you so much for that. But let's move on to the next one. I think people want to know your thoughts on performance-based talent analytics. What are your feelings on that?
Performance-based talent analytics is a good idea. I will only come back to always say that, look, performance is always in a context. And nowadays we have become very short-term context oriented. There is a possibility that performance based analytics may not always give you the full information about the potential of an individual. So don't overstress the short-term performance targets, and do not over depend on the data you generate on this. And I would go back to say, human beings are possibilities. What got you up till this point may not get you into the future. So always remember, there is always something new, something different. So don't use to condemn people. Use it to build people. Use it to, I think, to get the best of the people. But it is certainly useful, performance-based analytics, useful to identify what is good, what works well, under what circumstances, and what doesn't work.
Thank you. I think that sums it up beautifully. There is another question from Nepal saying, I hope I'm reading this right. Nepal is asking, in the organizational hierarchy, where are the HR specialist professionals more required? Are they required more at senior levels for taking HR transformation decisions, or are they required more at junior levels for transactional jobs? So where is the role of a specialist more appropriate, at senior or slightly more junior levels?
I have always promoted a hierarchy-less HR department. There should be no hierarchy. I think a senior person has his own role, a junior person has his own role. I think nowadays some of the juniors will be able to do a marvelous job. I think even if you are a specialist, like if you are a HR coach, you are a young fellow, you have a lot to coach even the seniors. You can observe, you can see what is the way impact they are having on the morale of their juniors and so on, and you can be a great coach. So there is no question of seniority, juniority. I believe that HR should be hierarchy-less. It doesn't matter. You should be, since you use the term specialist, a specialist is a specialist in every context. You'll have to only examine whether your specialization helps in a particular context. If it doesn't help, simply say that, sorry, no, this is not my cup of tea. And if it helps, I think you jump on it and then get on to this. So I don't think there is any need for hierarchy. Forget about hierarchy. That is what has killed this country.
I think that's beautifully put. I'm totally aligned with you on that, Dr. Rao. Nepal, I hope that answers your question. Additionally, it is a fact that a lot of organizations, especially in the Western world, use specialists at their corporate offices. Essentially, when you look at more you look at more region-centric offices, then you might have more generalists there, and that's what's been happening in the Indian market as well. But my personal feeling lies very closely to what Dr. Rao just said. You know, at a very subtle level, this does promote the hierarchical mindset, and I think it actually works anti to what one is really trying to achieve there. Okay, this one should be interesting. Almost 10 people have asked this question, Dr. Rao. What are the new skills that will be required by human resources professionals in the time of COVID, as well as going forward?
Well, in times of COVID, I think I have some of my YouTube videos, and I have talked about it, quite a bit of it. I think I have identified it's skill comes out of this particular kind of a thing. HR people should understand the multiple stakeholders they serve. I have always said, first thing that is important is to take good care of yourself. If you are not surviving, there will be no one to help anybody. So take good care of yourself, which means your health, your personality, which your psychological as well as otherwise you can't coach, you can't help. Second, take care of your family. Skills required to have a good surrounding, good support system is the second important thing. Third is that you are an employee champion. So your focus should be on making your people healthy. So you're concerned for all your employees. Long ago, Dave Ulrich wrote this, employee champion, HR champions. I think this is what is the important kind of thing. Then comes the fourth in the line. You are the employer. You are there to also take care of the interests of the employer. It's not employer's interest. Employers exist for employees and then the other stakeholders who are the shareholders, and you all exist in a community. You can't just say that if in my neighborhood something is happening, I'm not bothered about it. You can't be totally isolated. So skills that are required are, first of all, your own philosophy of life, your own way to understand that you are a part of the larger society. And that is where we bring so many things. We bring terms like agility, resilience, and more than all this, in the recent past, we have talked of empathy, human touch, concern for other kind of people. All these kind of things are very much required, particularly in emergency times like this. In fact, I think I just put a little bit of a video on YouTube about taking resilience as an example. Now, I went back just this morning to Larsen and Toubro in 1978, 79, identified, after interviewing all the managers, identified 40 qualities that are required to be successful in L&D. This is after. And one of them is resilience. Very well defined, exactly defined the same way we are talking of. So if I looked at all the 40, I don't find anything today, either McKinsey talks about, Hewitt talks about, E&Y talks about, or anywhere different, except here and there, we have changed a little bit of language. We have brought in maybe a little more customer orientation was there even those days, etc., etc. So I think the competencies that are required are not phenomenally different, but at this point of time, we are saying, please realize, COVID has taught us one big lesson. All people are equal. You have come from dust, you will go to dust. Remember this. And this is what it has taught us. It doesn't differentiate between a prime minister, president of a country, or a migratory labor and so on. So please remember this, that all human beings are equal and they have phenomenal potential. Now the migratory labor taught us something. It's important. If somebody goes 1500 kilometers carrying all his family members, walks and so on, what is the stamina he has? Now I keep asking HR people, do you have the stamina? Can you walk for 500 miles? And if you are committed, if you are passionate about your profession, you can walk any amount of miles. That is passionate. So that is what is required. Passion for what you do, concern for people. I mean, these are the kind of skills. And develop versatility. I think you should have a broad orientation to life. Today, we are saying that you can't anymore say, this is not my job. Every employee should be able to do everything. If that is so, I think we use the term in the past, multi-skilling. I think you should have the ability to therefore respect multiple talent in people, facilitate this and so on. And I would normally say, I think you should be, today I would very prominently say, you should be little spiritual. I'm not saying religious. Spiritual means somebody who understands the spirit behind the actions. why are some people become so passionate about it? If Isha Foundation has 9 million volunteers, we can't even get 9 volunteers in National HRD Network in some of the chapters. What is it? What brings passion? Now, if a HR manager can learn about what brings passion in his own kind of a company, then you have earned your bread and butter. You can do wonderful kind of things. So that is what a questioning mind, a research orientation, a constant learning kind of an attitude. I mean, these are the top of the mind kind of things.
No, I think that sums it up beautifully. In fact, some of those qualities are almost like classics. Resilience
Yes, absolutely.
was relevant 40 years ago, is relevant now, will probably be relevant 40 years later. Empathy, how you relate to people, versatility, desire to continue learning. I think some of these are classics, and you've weaved them together beautifully. I think that just about puts it bang on. Peter, how much time do we have? Do we have time for another question, or?
Yes, we can take another question. We do have time, so you can definitely take that. Yeah.
So Dr. Rao, one of the questions that's come up pertains to the 70-20-10 rule. I don't know who came up with that. I think it was Lombardo, if I remember correctly. So 70% of what people learn is from experiences on the job, 20% through social interactions, and 10% through formal learnings. So the question is, how do you see this whole model changing during the time of COVID and post-COVID?
I think I have been seeing people, a lot of them offering webinars and attending webinars. And they're all free webinars and also some training programs. These are the ones that may take care of a small percentage of the 10%, small percentage, because webinars are only informative.
Sure.
They at best give you a little bit of knowledge. Now, I don't think the model will, I mean, these percentages are, nobody has strictly measured, done a research, and even if you do a research, you'll not be able to come up very strictly 70, 20, 10. But I think that's a decent kind of a model. A lot of what one learns is from experience. But that experience is learned pretty fast if you have the 10% which is coming from training programs. The conceptualization helps you to assimilate experiences, shortens the time of building, converting it into a skill. If you don't have the 10%, then what happens is the 70% will go on year after year, you're learning. It is like I have 40 years of experience, the same thing multiplied by 40 years. No, that doesn't. So I think this is a decent golden kind of a rule, 70, 20, 10. In fact, my colleague Govindarajan, I'm sure you have heard of what he talks of. He has also come up with a similar theory, which is a 3-box theory. He says in terms of how do you manage your life, you should be able to, at least whenever you plan your own kind of a life, I think at least 10% of the time or 10% of the activities you are doing so far, you should discard every now and then. So I tell people in performance management, can you discard 10, 20% of what you have been doing last year as your KRAs, pass it on down the line, do something new, live in the present, 70% live in the present, maybe 15, 20% work for the future, and the remaining discard the past and things like that. I think interesting way of looking at it. I don't think this model will change if you appreciate that 10% of formal learning really puts you into the right kind of a perspective that is required to assimilate the 70% that you are learning and so on. There was a very interesting study conducted by Macaulay, very interesting. That is where I think 1980s, they have come up with this particular kind of a finding. Most of the top level executives who made it to higher levels, they were asked, what helped you to learn what you have learned? Very rarely they talked about the training program they attended. In fact, they have even taken for granted, even if they have graduated from Harvard, etc., they may not have acknowledged that. They said, my first job was the most important thing. A good boss I had, the failures I had, successes I had. But when you go deeper into this, you will find they have taken for granted the good education they have had helped them. I'm reasonably certain Sanjeev Bikhchandani, who started Naukri.com, he was a student of IIT and then IIM Ahmedabad. He told me once, Professor Rao, I still remember one class you taught us, that is on internal locus of control, where you said that you matter, your belief in yourself and things of that kind. Every time he meets me, he says, I still remember this. Now, I don't want to say that is because of this he has become what he has become. He has become what he has become because of certain other kind of thing. But that little thing may have helped him, may have given him some faith. So conceptualization, don't underrate the 10% of formal learning. I think that is always useful. And don't also underrate, every day is an experience. Multiply your experiences. So I love this model, and I think you should continue to keep learning from your own experiences and through training programs.
So, Krishnan, I hope that answers your question. Thank you so much, Dr. Rao. That was beautifully put there. I think we might be running out of time. Peter, where are we on time?
Yes, so it's up. However, if there is any questions at your end that you would like to take it, we can definitely do so, or else we can.
Yeah, I have to go off for some other meeting. So maybe one question, last question, if you have something.
So I think the last one, Dr. Rao, would probably be any message that you would like to leave HR professionals. You know, like I think that would really help.
Well, I have said, I've always said, if you are a HR professional, it is a God-given gift to you. Doctors take care of people to living of people, healthy living of people. HR people take care of both healthy living and livelihoods of people, employment, everything. You create happiness at work, which contributes. So recognize what a great thing it is to be a HR professional, and care for yourself and care for all others around you. Constantly build competencies, learn, and make a difference in the lives of other people. Thank you very much, Jagmohan. Wonderful, I think, interacting with you. I enjoyed your questions. I hope I have lived up to some expectation that you have.
Dr. Rao, you always lived up to much more than what the expectations are, and today is not an exception, and I think everybody else would probably feel the same way that I do. I'd like to, before I wind up, I'd like to just end the session with a quote from Dr. Rao, which I loved and I thought I'd share it with everyone. HR is not a product to be sold. It's a process to be lived. And I think Dr. Rao's personal and professional life has been a testament to that. It's been a pleasure having you here with us, Dr. Rao, and HRAI. Thank you so much for having both me and Dr. Rao here for this session. And thank you, viewers. Peter, over to you so that you can wind this up.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Rao, for sharing. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rao, for sharing your experience and learning. Thank you, Mr. Jagmohan, for taking us through this insightful journey. It was definitely wonderful to have both of you all out here on today's session. It has been a pleasure being with you all today. Thank you for taking up significant number of questions too. That would definitely help all our participants. Before we conclude with today's session, we would also want to thank all the associations for supporting HRAI event. Geisha IT Association, Geisha.
Peter?
Hello. Yes. Hello.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we are already running late on time, and Dr. Rao has to join somewhere else. We can skip this part for now.
Sure. Great. So thank you once again, dear panel members and our participants, for joining us today. Do join us for our next webinar on the 30th of July 2020 tomorrow to discuss on road to recovery from ideation to execution. See you soon. Stay safe. Take care, and bye for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jagmohan and Dr. Rao. Thank you so much.
Thank you.